Hi everyone, and welcome to our live about the topic of Mommy, what's a gay marriage? The backdrop is that there's been a lot of talk and churn on the internet and the digital spaces over the past hours about this issue, and I thought it would be helpful to offer you some thoughts, suggestions, and ways to think about it perhaps differently than you're accustomed to. The average parent does not have any hands-on experience in this issue, and how should you, unless there's an LGBTQ member in your family or a very, very close friend. So I wouldn't expect the average parent to understand it a certain way and to be able to really have conversations with your children about it. Just by background, my name is Yaakov Horowitz. I'll be 64 next month. I've been in chinuch and Jewish education all my adult life since 1982. I have been spending a significant amount of time mentoring parents, Orthodox parents of LGBTQ kids over the past few years. The number of folks I spoke to, certainly hundreds of parents. So I hope that I can share with you some thoughts that you'll find helpful. Just for the record, it is not my practice to make declarative statements of what parents should or shouldn't do. Not only is it your right, it's your obligation as a parent to do things and say things and have conversations with your children that are congruent with the way you see things and that's congruent with your lifestyle and worldview. Okay, so all those caveats aside, let me get right into it. So my very first overriding message would be to make sure or do everything possible, not only about this issue, but especially in an issue like this, to allow your children to have the comfort level to talk to you about things that they may not be comfortable doing so. I always say, try to get your kids comfortable having uncomfortable conversations with you. And that's about child safety, which is my topic now, that I'm talking about before the summer and to a great degree, but in any area of parenting, and certainly with an issue that in Orthodox families like ours, and like many of you, the issue of LGBTQ issues are not discussed typically with kids. So try to really do what you can to foster that culture and that feeling in the children that they can come to you about anything. Just on a simple pedestrian level. Just think of it this way, okay? When I was a kid, if somebody wanted to find out something of this nature, they had to go to a library. If it was private, honestly, they would go to a library, miles from their home or from the community, and they would have to spend hours, maybe a day or two, thoroughly researching anything. Now, your children, whether you do or don't have internet at home, whether you do or don't allow your kids to have phones, the fact of the matter is, trust me on this one, at certain ages, they will find out a lot of information. It might be the wrong information, but they're going to have lots of information. Worded differently, if you're not available to talk to them about this, and if you're an Orthodox Jew like myself, and from a Torah perspective, to give them our philosophy as far as our religious teachings are, as far as the Torah tells us. So who's going to give them that perspective? You can be sure that the perspective they get will be from the internet, and in all likelihood will be exactly what you don't want them thinking about this. It's a really important thought. I mean, I've been it's my feeling, it's perhaps the preeminent value of parents and something you try to get into your home. I call it Tell Me Anything. And when I do workshops, you can do a Google search, Yaakov Horowitz, Tell Me Anything. And you'll find lots of content on it, especially at my other Instagram page, At Bright Beginnings Forum, I do daily short parenting clips under a minute and a half. We've done almost 800 already. And many of them, if you tell me anything, you'll get at least 30, 40 clips on it. Go search through it. It's not something we can discuss in 2 minutes. But what I do is I put up a slide of an iceberg, okay? An iceberg, 10% is above water, 90% is below water. And on the slide it says, if your kids can't confide in you, then you got 10%. You know 10% of what's really going on. I'm not talking about, what athletics they're involved in and things. I'm talking about things that are really important to the kids and that they may not be comfortable talking to you about. So those things, 90% of them, you won't know unless the kids tell you. So I think it's always been an important value, but certainly in this generation where information is so accessible, and frankly, I don't mean this in a disparaging way, it's just myself included, it's the real deal, where the kids know so much more about technology than we do. So it's so important. So my suggestion is if your child comes home and asks what's a gay marriage, sit down and say, sweetheart, I'm so glad that you were comfortable talking to me about it. And you can always tell me anything. Don't make a big deal out of it because you might get them bugged out. But do say that several times during the conversation. I'm so happy that you feel comfortable talking about it. And then, you discuss with them as you see fit. But that's what I said. It's not my place to tell you that, to tell you how to discuss it, how you should feel about it, how you should think about it. That's your own set of values, and I think every parent should be conveying that to their children. But do it in a way that you're accessible, that you're not dogmatic, meaning you say, this is what it is, and here's how we feel, and anything other than that, So, second point, I believe in every word of the Torah. I believe in the 13 Ani Maamins. I'm sorry about that. The Rambam, Maimonides, has a list of, please forgive me, it wasn't scheduled. Maimonides has a list of 13 attributes, things that as Jews we believe in. And one of them is that the Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu came directly from God, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that every word in the Torah is sacred, and there will never be another Torah, another body of religious teaching to us. So my belief system includes the prohibition on gay relationships, explicitly men, a bit less so related to women. That's a much broader discussion. I do believe in it. I think by its very nature, faith also includes or is primarily needed for things we don't understand. So I do believe, it's my anecdotal experience, there is no doubt in my mind that there are some people who are born gay. They were born this way. They're attracted to the same sex, the same gender, and they're not attracted to the opposite gender, and their relationship with the opposite gender is the same as mine would be for the same gender. Now, there are some people who say that's not true. If that's the case, we're in a very different space. Just so you know, when I was learning about this, I asked at least 100 parents, like, when did you find out that your child was gay? Some of them said right away, it was a shock to us. Many of them said that we felt like it was that way from birth. Many. Not literally birth, but when the kids were already young children already, we just felt that. So if that's the case, honestly, we have a faith question. Why does Hashem make people like this? And what does Hashem expect them to do? This is not a blasphemous question. I don't think it's apicursus to ask this question. And myself, I don't profess to understand that fully. I also don't understand why God, in his infinite wisdom, took my father from me when he was 41 years old and I was 3. I still haven't figured this out, folks. We just commemorated his 60th yahrzeit, okay? I'm no closer to understanding it now than I was 10 years ago and 30 years ago. And I'll probably live the rest of my life feeling the same way. Why do I believe in God then? I think that's what faith means. Faith means that there are things that we don't understand. And we don't understand why people are born with disabilities. There are so many questions along those lines. You can go to bigger questions. I just want to point out that many things can be true at the same time. You can be a believer in every word of the Torah. You can be including the prohibition on gay relationships. And you can also feel that it's something that you have difficulty understanding. So I just wanted to put that out. I very strongly encourage parents to respond to your children's questions. Let's say your child comes to you and asks you questions like this. Let's say they say, well, what does Hashem want? You know, we can do anything you want. I would very, very strongly advise you not to just swat it down. There are people who look at a situation like mine when my father died and they say, I have no questions. I accept it with full faith. Everything is a gift. We just don't know about it. And I stand in awe of their faith. Really, genuinely, seriously. There are people who feel this way, that it's a gift, we don't understand it. Now, on some level, I know that that's true, but this is a sore subject. I'm just speaking for myself, Yankee Horowitz, okay? I've gone through many different experiences in my lifetime. This one is something that I just can't figure out. And let me tell you a fascinating thought that I heard from Rabbi Moshe Tendler, who's the son-in-law of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein Zatzal. So I heard it firsthand. And I think it's an important issue to discuss in terms of faith. And it might be helpful for you, if your child does have a question of faith regarding this issue, to have an honest discussion. There's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with telling your children that you struggle with it also. If you do, be honest with them. But if you do, it's okay to say to them, and go to a rabbi together. Go to a scholar or somebody who can help you with that. I think some people are embarrassed to do it. I think it's the most beautiful thing you can do as a parent, to be honest with your child and say the way you feel. And that when we don't know answers to theological questions, we go ask experts. I think it's such a beautiful thing to do. So I want to share this thought from Moshe Feinstein because I think it's so important, and it speaks to this issue of having perfect faith and having questions at the same time. Excuse me, please. So, Rav Moshe Feinstein followed Shulchan Aruch, followed the Dakota Jewish law. Folks, lots of people don't listen to it. But it says when you go to a mourner's home to pay a shiva call, we're not supposed to speak until they address us. I think it was just brilliant insight on the part of our sages that understood that some people don't want to talk, and not everything that we say might make the mourner feel better. And if you've ever sat shiva, you know that some people say things that are just, off the charts. Rav Moshe followed Shulchan Aruch. I tried to do the same myself, with him humbly, So Rav Moshe was sitting, Rav Tendler told me he was together with Rav Moshe. He told me the name of the family, a family in Muncie many years ago, in my hometown of Muncie. And a young man died and left Nebuch. He sadly left a family of teenagers and children. And Rav Moshe was quiet, and he blessed them, he gave them a blessing, and he started to get up to leave. He was going to say the verse. There's a text that we say to mourners. And the family asked him to say something. Please tell us something. Tell us something that gives us comfort. Our faith. One of the parents, I think the widow came to him, or one of the old grown children said that we're having a terrible struggle with faith. Can Rav Moshe, can the Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Feinstein was perhaps the preeminent rabbinic scholar, when I was growing up in the previous, from the post-war generation in the Orthodox Jewish world. So, again, the family asked them a question. We want to hear something to give us some direction about faith. So Rabbi Feinstein said as follows. He said, we have a blessing called Hatov v'Hametiv. We say, Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed be you God. Hatov v'Hametiv, that does good things for us. And we say this on festive occasions. The Shehechiyanu was a similar thing that we've been privileged to live to this time. Those two are happy blessings that we make with gratitude to God. At a funeral, we say, blessed be you God, Baruch Atah Hashem, Dayan ha'emes, that you're a just judge. You're a Dayan, you're a judge, emes, truthful, meaning that we accept God's verdict, this bad verdict, right? When you say gzeira, it doesn't mean that we're happy about it. It means it's painful. We're very upset about it, but we accept that God is an honest judge. And we're not fighting back and say, So, listen to what Rabbi Feinstein said. It was so profound, and it was so simple, and it really helped me in a very meaningful way in my own faith and my own religious journey to try to understand things to the best of my ability. And I think it's something that you might find, obviously, if the age is right. So Rabbi Feinstein said, Rav Moshe said that, well, if we believe that everything is for the good, we're obligated to believe that everything is for the good. That's what we're supposed to believe, that God watches over us and that He gives us tests, and those tests are to make us stronger, and we don't understand all the details, why we're chosen to do these things. In my case, why my father died when I was young. But we accept it. In other words, we're saying Hashem is a just judge. We're not happy about this. We're terribly upset about it. But we accept that God is just. So Rabbi Feinstein, so Rav Moshe says, so we should make it at a funeral, we should make, blessed be you God, Baruch Atah Hashem, Hatov v'Hametiv, that you did good for us. This is good. I don't understand it now. The mourners don't understand it now. So Rabbi Feinstein said that our sages, in their great insight and wisdom, I'm so sorry about the noise, understood that it's okay to have this reality check. In other words, the mourners say, we know, God, that we're supposed to believe this one day. And we know that as religious Jews, we believe in our souls that everything is right for us. But that's not how we feel right now when we have this deceased relative in front of us. So they didn't, so to speak, the sages didn't force us to say a tov hametiv, a good blessing, but rather accept the reality. I know I'm supposed to believe this, but that's not how I feel right now. Okay? And invariably, this discussion with some might get to theological questions. Like I said, it's okay to say I don't understand, and it's okay to go for it. I also want to point out that this issue of LGBTQ overall, and with many other social issues, it's very generational. It's very generational, meaning that people my age are typically less tolerant about not only LGBTQ, which is other issues also, but less tolerant. It's almost every few years or every decade. You know how old the people are. There is a direct correlation, and the younger children, I'm telling you, even in very, very Orthodox communities and faith communities of other faiths, this is a feature that younger children tend to be more tolerant. I've heard this from hundreds of educators and parents and professionals in the field. Additionally, what happens is, I'm speaking about one situation that I was involved with a few years ago. A young man, a 19-year-old young man, came out and said that he was gay. He was the Hebrew valedictorian and the English valedictorian in elementary school and in high school. So the parents and people were saying things, and and the kids didn't, like, this is the guy who I asked questions for when I was studying for Talmud. This is the one I look up to. Their faith was really rattled by all of this. So when your child asks you that, you don't know what the backstory is. That's why listening is so important. You sit down with them, and so you don't know if they're struggling with their faith, if they're not struggling with their faith, if they say, look, this is a terrible thing, gay marriage, and it's horrible, or they say, let them do, So listen very carefully. Listen to them. Let them talk to you. Let them ask you questions now and later. But understand that this is a generational thing. Someone just spoke to me today, and when I said this, I said, it's very generational. And the person told me, a very wise person, and they said that their children keep telling them that they used words, to describe the fact that they were less than tolerant. And I'm telling you from experience, I've been dealing in this, not just this space, but with families and kids and teens and everything. If the perception of the children are, if you go over the top and you speak very dogmatically and harshly, there's two separate things. Again, two things can be true. You can say that this practice is forbidden by our Torah, and you could also say, I empathize with the struggle that these people are going through. That's not a conflict at all. So, but if you come across harsh and dogmatic and you start saying personal things, especially in today's environment, unfortunately in this great country of ours, this whole LGBTQ issue has become extremely politicized and extremely nasty. And I spoke on this page probably 5 times in the last couple of years, begging people not to forward these nasty memes and these jokes about this subject. So please be mindful about how you speak and do it in a way that I believe we must be empathetic with the struggle that people have. If a woman is childless, a couple is childless, God forbid, or someone has a physical disability or other issues or dealing with mental wellness issues, we're generally empathetic. Mental wellness might have a little bit of work to do still. But to empathize with the struggle that they're undergoing and the faith questions they may have and other things like this. So if you accept that some people are born this way, imagine what faith struggles they have. Imagine how difficult it is for them. I'm involved with many people. A generation ago, many folks were counseling people who said they were gay to get married to a straight woman, and it'll straighten itself out, and these heartbroken people are getting into their 30s and 40s and divorcing, and it's such a tragedy. This is such a complicated issue. That's what I want to encourage you. Speak about the public policies the way you feel, and it's perfectly fine. You say, listen, I would feel this way if I was a public school. If I was a parent and my children were in public school, I'm telling you, 100%, I would say, listen, don't teach them anything in school. They have parents. We'll talk to them about it. We want to talk to them, viewing it the way we see it. And like other things, send a disclaimer home that you're talking about this on a certain day. I'll keep our child home. So the fact that everybody should be treated, that if you have LGBTQ classmates of yours, to treat them with kavod and kindness and gentle and not say hurtful things. I hope that everybody could agree with that. But I don't need to know. But I don't want my children. This is something that a parent should do. There are public policy issues. Let's say, for example, that and as much as I've been an advocate, as much as I've been an advocate for LGBTQ people to be treated with kavod, as an institution, I stepped down from my yeshiva 10 years ago. If a gay couple came and wanted to register a child there, I certainly in the yeshiva that I was running at the time, that wouldn't have even been a question. That's something I would not have done. I'm being honest. It doesn't make me judgmental. It means we have a religious Orthodox yeshiva. And I think, maybe I'll discuss this at a later time. I have some thoughts about this, but I'm just discussing you as a parent to separate that's what I meant by public policy issues. There are public policy issues and there are personal issues. And please separate the two when you talk to your children. An individual, I'll mention, I mentioned it in a video a while ago. Forgive me if I'm droning on a little bit. My first, years ago, a young man came to me. I've had many young men. There are many people who've, had similar conversations with me. Usually when people come and want to talk to me about things that are uncomfortable, I try to make it easier for them, certainly, and me also. I said, come with a pair of sneakers, we'll go for a walk. So this young man was walking, and I want you to understand, this is what I mean by empathetic. Think of this fellow. He said, I'm 22, 23 years old, whatever. I'm back from Eretz Yisrael, from Israel, from the gap year. My friends are in Shidduchim, they're dating. What should I do? I'm gay. He said, I never was in a relationship. I don't plan on getting into a relationship with a man. He said the Torah prohibits it. This guy, very learned, very sincere, a wonderful human being. I would be proud to have him as a son or a son-in-law. Just a great, fine, wonderful young man. And he said, Rebbe, what am I supposed to do now? And his words, we said, look, I can fool a Beis Yaakov girl, meaning I can go get married. The easiest thing for my life would be now to marry a straight woman. He said, how could I be such a horrible person and deceive a girl, even though it would be great, it would be certainly a solution for me for now. And he looked at me, he said, any ideas? And then he said that Yosef HaTzadik, Yaakov's son, Jacob's son, Joseph, was in Egypt, and he was seduced by the wife of his master. And he said, this is the words that he told me. He said that Yosef had an Nisayon, we call him Yosef HaTzadik, Yosef the righteous one, because even though he was alone and away from his family, and he wasn't married, and this woman was trying to seduce him, he stood up to the test, so we call him Yosef HaTzadik. He said, these were his words. He said, Yosef had an Nisayon, he had a test for 15 minutes, for a day, whatever. It says a few days, He says, I have this all my life. What am I supposed to do? So, like I said, it's not a conflict saying this is what public policy is. And understanding the life of this young man, and so many people like that, so many of them are self-harming. And just do the research on the suicide rate. So we should be doing it in a way, this is not what you should have conversations with your children about, but if your child is old enough and you do have discussions and they do ask you tough theological questions, that might be approach. Again, depending on the maturity level and your comfort with doing this, you might want to say, listen, we're not talking about this. This is not something we discuss, and whatever, it's a lifestyle that's not supported by the Torah. Again, it's their choice to make. I'm done. I have other things that I would like to speak about that I think might be helpful to parents. What I'm going to do is I'm posting up a flyer with this information, that what I'm going to be doing, certainly until Sunday, I'm going to be accepting questions about this issue on my Instagram page. So you could message me, please, just a couple of sentences, and write generically, because we're going to cut and paste it into a slide. And for each of the questionnaires, don't put any information there that you don't want other people to know. Meaning, write it generically. My daughter said this, we have an LGBTQ relative, whatever's on your mind. And I'll put those on a slide, and follow up with a video response of less than a minute and a half. Okay, if there are some issues that are more global in nature, perhaps I'll do a live later tonight, or I'll announce it on this page. So just to sum up, like if your children come home and if you haven't had a conversation like this with them, let them talk. Let this be a clear message from you. You can talk to us about anything. Seek advice if you don't know exactly how to respond. If there's a faith question, I try to give you some tools on this live. Feel free, you should go to your rabbi, to someone you respect that can help you formulate a response. I think you go together with your child is just extraordinarily helpful. And just be mindful of how you respond. And I encourage you to try to separate the two, the public policy issues, which is, look, we don't want our kids discussing gay marriage. I certainly don't want young children talking about this whole thing. And not to say hurtful things to the people themselves. I posted a video with this story that I just told you about the young man. I posted it about 6-7 years ago. If I remember and if I can find the piece up, the clip, I'll put it on this Instagram page also. I'm going to be putting some other things there too. But so the my wife and I invited, because we were flooded. I was flooded. After that video appeared, it got like 15,000 views overnight. It's still on my my YouTube page. It's at Yaakov Horowitz. And my wife and I invited about a dozen young LGBTQ, young men and women, young adults, to our home for lunch. I just felt, my wife and I felt that, I felt especially strongly that now that I'm dealing in this space and trying to help people, I felt that I should learn more. I have an obligation to learn more about I should learn more about this issue, this LGBTQ issue. So we had a wonderful lunch, wonderful discussions with the young men and women. And two things are of note that I think I would like to share. One of them was that one of the young men told me that he made a shehechiyanu, he made a blessing reserved for milestone occasions in life. This is what he said, when I sat down, I made a shehechiyanu blessing. He says, because I never dreamed that you, as a rabbi or any rabbi, would ever let me in my home, in your home, knowing who I am. That's what he said. I never believed that someone like you would invite someone like me into your home. And it was so heartbreaking to hear him say it, and the pain that he expressed there. And why shouldn't anybody be welcome in our home, regardless of what they do? Wouldn't I welcome someone in who wasn't keeping Shabbat? Whatever, it was just very painful. And then when we broke up, they were there for about a couple of hours, I asked them, what could I do for you? Is there anything I can do to help? So one of the young people said, please tell people not to say hurtful things to us. This was the quote. I will never forget it as long as I live. Both of those interactions. They said, please tell people not to say hurtful things to us. We're trying to figure it out ourselves. Please please tell people to give us the space to figure it out. So I can only convey to you how, I don't know if they're a representative sample, I didn't do a study, but this is a nuanced subject. It's a very painful subject. And you might not know it, but it's a pretty fair bet that in your own network, you have several people who are parents of LGBTQ kids or grandparents. And I think it's a subject that should be treated respectfully and with dignity as Jews. And if there are questions that require more than a minute and a half video, I'll do my very best to do a live and address them. Thank you very much for listening.